Begin.
Complicated. Yep.
Kum Lenen Ablat Gemara. We're up to the Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, 5 lines on the top of the page. We're talking about the Mitzri and the Edaymu, that the third generation, they're permitted to go back into the fold. Tell what we learned. It says in the pasuk that in the third generation, it says in the pasuk, the children that they will give birth to, Bani Masha Yivoldim, Dor Shlishi, the third generation, Yavu Lehem Bekalsha, they can come back. It starts off talking about Yivoldu giving birth and Bonim not to give birth, and then it turns into Dor. So Bonim and Dor, two different ways of expressing it. So you want to know why need both different ways. Why is it pasuk change? How do I learn? If it says children, why do you call it generations? If you call it refer to it as generations, why call it children? The Gemara explains. If that pasuk would have just said that the children that they were born, the third one is all right. You know what we would have thought? Not the third generation, the third child. So your first two children are forbidden, but shlishi, your third child, is permitted. No, not your third child. Doidus, third generation. No, should just say doidus. I would have thought this is a message only for those people standing in Hasinai, and you're telling them that the third generation, in 3 generations, they can all come back. That you should know, you can start counting from your children, that it's for all generations. Children that you will give birth to over the years. Then it said the pasuk, children that were born to them. Lahem, what does it come to say? Lahem, mehem mana, that you are the first one. Lahem, the children are born to you. So your generation 1, your children generation 2, and then the grandchildren of generation 3, they can come back. And then we dash in lahem, the second lahem. It says then the third generation. Yavay lahem b'kal Hashem. What's the second lahem? Halech achar psulam. That it's the second one comes to tell you that you, for example, if 2 people get married, and let's say if a Mitzri marries a Yisraelis, you don't say, oh, the mother is a Yisraelis, everything's all right. No, you go whichever one is the one that's possible. That's who the child goes after. Until the third generation. So I had to say lahem. That means what? You start counting the 3 generations from the parents, and then you had to say that the children they will give birth to. That so what do you have to say? The children they will give birth to? So obviously, we're saying from them and onwards. What do you mean the children give birth to? And it sounds like by saying from the children you give birth to, it sounds like you start counting from the children. So the Gemara says, "The children give birth to have been." I would have thought that's when you begin counting from your children. So 3 generations from them, including them, not from yourselves. Children born to you, which means you are the first generation. I would have thought it only said lehem and didn't say children you're born. I would have thought mitzis mu'uberes. If you have a mitzi that is pregnant, she is guided that she converted together with her fetus. He ubenocha, they're both considered 1 generation. Because it only counts for when they are born. So if the child was inside the mother's womb at the time, that doesn't count. And when it's born, that's already generation number 2. It says over here the word. It says come back to them, and by a mamzer it says the same thing, that the mamzer should not join the call of Hashem, even the 10th generation. You shouldn't come to him. What do you mean loy? And again, we said before, lahem is coming to teach you. You go after whichever parent is possible. And by a mamzer, it would mean the same thing. So if a mamzer marries a kosher woman, let's say, the child is considered a mamzer. We learn from loy, so I need both. Teaching us the same thing. If either parent is possible, the child is possible. Because I'm going to say over here by a mitzvah, I would say, you know why by mitzvah we say we don't care who the mother is, who the father is. If one of them is possible, the child is possible. Because the father or the mother, who's the mitzvah, was born as a goy. So therefore, the child will be like whichever is worse. But a mamzer, the father of the mamzer is a Yisrael, ein maloi, because comes from a Yisrael, doesn't matter, they didn't have it, but it comes from Yisrael, so maybe over there, we don't say you go after whichever one is more possible, maybe go after the mother, whatever, because only by mamzer should they go. Mamzer is so bad, it's not suitable to ever come into the koll, so therefore we say that whichever parent is the mamzer, the child, it becomes a mamzer as well. Forever. Over here, by mitzvah, the third generation, you permitted to marry into the Jewish fold. Ema, therefore, lie. Over there, you say, well, we're more lenient, and we'll go after the mother or something. If you need both. To tell you, in both cases, if one of the parents are apostle, so are the children. Okay, we're going to have three versions of Rabbi Yochanan. Version number one. Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabba Bar Chana came along and said, Rabbi Yochanan, if a mitzri sheni, shenosa, mitzri shena, if they're both mitzri, if a mitzri or sheni marries a mitzri shena, so let's say the father is second generation, the mother's first generation, b'na shlishi, I say that the kid goes after the father, and the kid is considered third generation. Even though a minute ago we said you go after the apostle b'nein, how can you come along, Rabbi Yochanan, now and say, or how can Rabbi Babachazin and Rabbi Yochanan, no, you go after the father, and if it's less possible, so be it. But why is that? Because when do they say you go after the psulim when you didn't aveda? For example, a mitzvah marrying a Yiddish woman is forbidden. You didn't aveda, then you know what we'll say? Halach acha psulim. Whichever one is possible, that's what we go after. But here, no aveda was done. A mitzvah is allowed to marry a mitzvah. When no aveda is done, he says you go after the father. Alma kasava boss of the day, he holds you go after the father. Okay, he'll go after the father. Rabbi Yisrael has a question. Tarfon said there's a way how a mamzer, there's a way even today how a mamzer can cleanse themselves. How can a mamzer cleanse themselves? How can they purge their mamzeres? Because we learned before already that the children of a maid, of a Kananis, are hers, and the father, there is no father. So if he purchases an Ever Kanani, and then he lives with her and has a child, the child is not considered his. And then he liberates this child. So now the child is a full-fledged Yid, is Megai, a full-fledged Yid. And what do you call it? It's no longer Mamzer, because it's not considered his child. That's what Tarfon said. Havlad is considered, and the Eved has nothing to do with him. And then is Shichra, he liberates her, Nimtza Ben Chayin, Alma, what do we see? So what does he from that case did? We would say the child's not his, it's hers. What did he tell me that by the case of a mitzvah, we consider the child his, and if he's a sheni, second generation, the child's a third. Here we see by a shivcha that you go after the mother. Says what are you comparing a shivcha to a mitzvah? Shivcha is a special pasuk that we had before already. Shani Hasa, a shivcha is different because the Amar Kra, there's a meferish pasuk there. It's a kasav. Ha'isha the yoladeh tiladena. The woman and her children belong to her master. So the pasuk there clearly specifies that the children belong to the woman, belong to the master. But in ordinary circumstances, Rabbi Yochanan says it goes after the father. So the father is a second generation mitzvah, even though the mother is a third generation, because they haven't committed any avera between the two. The children are go after the father. Most of Rabbi, that's another question. Rabbi Yehuda said, we had this just now. Minyamin, I had a friend called Minyamin Gein Mitzi. He was a convert of Mitzi. He was a friend of mine, and he was one of the students of Rabbi Akiva. And he used to say, "Ani Mitzi edition. I am a first generation Mitzi, Venasati Mitzi Rishon, and I married a first generation Mitzis. I'm going to make sure that my son marries a second generation mitzvah in order that the grandchildren will be able to marry into the Jewish fold." So what did he say? That his son has to marry also a second generation mitzvah. Why? According to Rabbi Yochanan, it doesn't matter. He can marry a first generation mitzvah. Why does he have to say his son has to marry a second? Doesn't that prove that we go after whichever is worse, and that's why we have to make sure that they're both equal? My grandson Rola will come back to the Jewish fold. If you can say that after the man, after the Nami, who cares if his son marries a mitzvah, first generation mitzvah? The grandchildren are going to be third generation. Says the Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Yochanan actually told, according to my version, according to Rabbi Bachan's version, Rabbi Yochanan actually said you made a mistake in this price here. The Tana Tani Yidishayna say that my son, who's a second generation, will marry a mitzvah even though she's a first generation. You're exactly right. Change, amend the brisa. That's version number one. Now version number two. If a second generation mitzvah married a first generation mitzvah is benosh, the child is a sheni. According to this version, you go after the mother. Again, since no Aveda was committed, you don't go after the whichever was worse. You go after the mother. Alma Basi, you should look after the mother. Abai says, so now what's possible logic is it you go after the mother? So all the Rishonim understood, and based on the flow of the Gemara, the logic is that Uber Yelad Imay, that a child is like the mother. A child of Uber is part of the mother. She's considered part of the mother, and therefore whatever the mother is, that's what the child is. If she's a Mitzi Shania, second generation, the child is third. If she's first, the child is second. We don't care. We ignore the father. The Uber Yedech Imay, the Uber is like the thigh of the mother. It's another limb of the mother. So you're always asking a question from another. We see that that Uber is not Yerechima, he's not considered a limb of the mother. The Gemara says, Ella himself, the same Rabbi Yochanan said, we're going to prove to you that Rabbi Yochanan holds that Uber is not Yerechima. Uber is not another limb of an outgrowth of the mother, and therefore shouldn't follow the mother. Where do you see that? By Karbonos. We're talking about animals, but the halacha is the same. It says there, we know that there are 5 different carbon chatois that in certain circumstances we can't do anything with it, we have to burn them. For example, that if you had the way Rashi learns, if you had a carbon chatas, and then before you actually brought it fell pregnant and then it gave birth. That vlad, what do you do with that vlad? You can't do anything with it because it came from a chatas, but you don't need a second chatas for the same sin. So therefore, you have to, for example, let it die. So the Gemara says that hiflish chatas better, but if you set aside an animal that was already pregnant, the yolda, and it gave birth, rotza, you have a choice. If you want, you can use the original animal you set aside. And the other one just wanders about till the contract's a mum, and then you sell it. Or mischaper blood if you want. Alternatively, you can go ahead and use the offspring. Now, why can you use either one? It's like if you set aside 2 karbonos, one will be your carbon, the other one will be a guarantee. If I lose this one, I have that one. So because the Chatchili set aside one for a carbon for a guarantee, and if whichever one you use for a carbon, the other one doesn't get killed, the other one just wants about to get a carbon until you get the moon. If you set aside one and you lost it, so you set aside another one, and then you recover the first one, then the one you bring as a chatas, and the other one, it has to die. Because it was set aside as a chatzas, but you can't use. So there are 5 chatois that die. But in this case over here, we say that if the animal was already pregnant when you set it aside, it's considered as if one is an animal and one is just a backup. But if you tell me that the baby cat has nothing to do with the mother, it's like 2 separate, independent chatois. If you set aside 2 animals, one will be the chatas and one will be the guarantee. So either one can be used. Rabbi said, if you do that, if you set aside 2 animals, one for the carbon, one to be a guarantee, one of them will be an animal, and the other one will wander about, and then until the contract's a moon. However, if you can learn like the way you learn right now, that Uber is considered Yerechima. If you can tell me that Uber is Yerechima, it's like another limb of the mother, the side of the mother. Then have a leiblat chatas. So then it's as if you set aside the mother, and this is part of the mother. Is velat chatas misa? Now that you only use the mother for the carbon, the velat of a chatas is one of the 5 animals that goes to misa. Also, he went ishtik. So in other words, if Uber, the way you're learning Uber Yerechima, because you go the child is considered the mother, and therefore it's considered whatever the mother is, that's what we follow. If so, my question here is how you explain the animal. Say Rabbi Yochanan, and he said by an animal is considered 2. It's considered like part of the mother. And he's quiet. He said, this is what Abai said to what do you call it? To this to Rabdimi. So interesting. So Rabdimi was a student of Rabbi Yochanan, but I guess, and yet he was able to see Abai. He must have lived quite a long time, because Abai lived 2 generations later. He said, Dilma Shiny Hassam. So Abai then himself answered the question. Interesting. So he asked the question of Dimi was stumped. So Abai said, let me see if I can answer. Dilma Shiny Hassam. Maybe animals or kabbans are different. The chesiv, it says a pasuk, or maybe when it comes to mitzvah, it's different. By a mitzvah, it says Asher Yivoldu. It says the pasuk, the children that you will give birth. Hakosav Tolim Beleda. The Torah clearly says you go after the one who gives the birth, and who is that? The mother. That's why maybe Rabbi Yochanan said that you go after the mother, because it says Asher Yivoldu, And who is the Yivoldu? Not the father, the mother. That's how we know. So the mother's the first generation, even though the father's second generation, we go after the mother, the child is considered the second generation. Says the Gemara, Amalei, Savdimi felt cheated. He says, I don't believe that this answer came from you. It's too smart, too clever. Amalei, Kakafna, you intelligent one, like a kakafta, head. You head mensch, you cup mensch, as we say in Yiddish. Chazise lereishet bein amudi. I saw your head there between the pillars when Rabbi Yochanan gave the shir. In other words, you must have heard it. It's not your vart. You heard it directly from Rabbi Yochanan, and you caught me out because I wasn't there. So it's questionable the way Rashi learns it. It sounds like it takes it literally that he was there, not figuratively speaking. Even though the Chayda is figurative, Rabbi could never have been there. We don't even find that Rabbi ever went to Etzisrael. So or he lived in the time of Yochanan. But I guess it's figuratively, even though Rashi seems to be teaching us literally. You must have been there, but when Rabbi Yochanan said this din, you must have been standing there between the pillars. Or you can learn the Gemara that he was complimenting him. You're so clever, it's as if you were there at the shir because you came up with the very thing. So the Gemara well, that's a question. So you're telling me, but here's an exception because the Pasuk Shevoldu, that's why you go after the mother. But normally you don't go after the mother. So that's a question. The Ksiva Shevoldu. You tell me the whole reason because the Pasuk Shevoldu gave birth, who's at the mother. But generally you go after the father. Tell me, Rav said. A pregnant woman a pregnant woman converted, but no ain't that if the mother converted and she went to the mikveh and she was pregnant, then the fetus does not require when it's born does not require a separate tefillah. Why? The tefillah of the mother includes the child. That means the child is considered part of the mother. You're telling me that really Uber lav yerechimai. Uber is not considered part of the mother. And the only reason why b'mitzri could have a pasuk Yivoldu is to explain to me why if a pregnant woman converts, why her child doesn't need his or her own going to the mikveh. It's enough the mother's, as if to say it's part of the mother. So the mother, no, nothing to do with that. It's definitely not part of the mother. But what's the problem with the child in the mikveh? There's a chatzitza. But over here, it's not considered chatzitza. Why not? Because we're not makbid, meaning as follows. If you're going to answer me the reason why the child is mikveh, not because the child is part of the mother, because it's as if the child was in the mikveh. Because when the mother went to the mikveh, the child went with the mother, was immersed in the mikveh. And there's an obstruction, there's something blocking the water from reaching the fetus, the mother's body. But we go follow Rabbi Chadamar says that according to the Torah, it's only if you're makbid, only if you don't want this to be standing in the way and you want to remove it, then we say it's a chatzitz, is considered an interception. But over here, we're not makbid with a chatzitz at all because the child needs the mother to grow. So it's not like a stain or something or that you want to get rid of. On the contrary, so there's no chatzitz here because it's not makbid. Even though with the Rabbanon, even if you're not makbid, it doesn't matter. But I'm talking about Mahatayda now. But the majority is makbid is not chayit, so that's why the child is mikveh good. Not because the child is part of the mother, but because the child himself or herself went to the mikveh. But only if the majority, if the majority is covered, but makbid, it doesn't matter. But here the entire fetus is covered by the mother, and everyone agrees the entire fetus by the mother. Then it's a chatzitza. So we answer, shiny Uber. Uber is different. Taka Uber is not part of the mother, but since the Hainu, we say this is how the Uber grows, this is how the Uber is supposed to be, this is how Uber grows, has to be inside the mother's womb. Therefore, it's not considered a chatzitza. According to Rashi, in a few places in the Shas, when we talk, this whole Gemara is talking about the hair of a person, and make a difference whether it's Rav and Makbid or Rav and not Makbid, but the rest of the body, even a miyat, is considered chatzitza. But from this Gemara here, it seems clear that the Rishonim say that no, that even the body, if it's a Reivi, not Makbid, it's not a Chatzitza. Anyway, says Gemara further, that's opinion number 2. And they're all in Rabbi Yochanan. Comes along opinion number 3. Ravina came along, and the only way to explain it is that Rabbi Yochanan had one opinion earlier on, and another opinion later, and then another opinion later, and he changed his mind. So each one is telling the truth, what he heard from Rabbi Yochanan at the time. So sometimes in the past in the Gemara we had, is he lying? Says the Gemara, Ravina came along, he said, Rabbi Yochanan, he came later, but he says, when it comes to Goyim, he says, when it comes to Goyim, you always go after the father. But Nizgairu, if both of the parents are Megayer, then Halech Acha Pogu Shebereim. You learned till now that when we say you go after whichever one is more possible, only if they committed a sin. For example, a Mitzri marries a Yisrael. I say no, it doesn't matter if they did a sin. If both parents converted, then you go after whichever one is more possible. So for one of them is a second generation Mitzri, one is the first, we will treat the child as if the child is born from a first generation Mitzri. The child is only a second. So halech achapoglu shebishneim glaf. They're worse for both. Now, how do you know by umas halech achazok? I know by goyim we go after the male. Because by us we go after the female, and how do you know by them we go after the male? Tanya, we learn because you know the 7 nations of Canaan you had to destroy. You're not allowed to let them live. What happens if another member, not from the 7 nations, from another country, comes in and marries a Canaanite? So she's a Canaanite, and the husband is from somewhere else. How do you know? How do you know you're allowed to keep them as a slave? Remember, it says, it says, from those people who come in Hagorim Imachem, from those who dwell here in Eretz who live amongst you, from them you should buy. So what do we see? It says, so you're allowed to buy slaves who live in your country. And what do you call it? They were talking about Bnei Teshavim. They come from overseas, and they become your father. So therefore you're allowed to, because we look at the father, and if the father is not from the 7 nations, no problem. Because this is all masculine. Males that live amongst you, Teshavim, they moved in. They're immigrants. Okay, so we know you go after the father. How do you know? What happens if a male Kanani marries a female from another nation? Ben had a child. How do you know? But you're not allowed to, because if the father is a Kanani, you can't use them, they can't let them live. We would have thought, therefore the pasuk says, those that were born in your land, but in other words, because the women then, if the woman lived overseas and then came to move, because usually the Rashi says women move to where the husband lives. If the woman came to where the husband was, they're called godim. They're only living here. They weren't born here because they come from another country. Those we don't want, because the father's a Kanani. So we see, when it comes to going, we follow the male. When it comes to 2 people converted, a mitzvah and a mitzvah, we go after which is more possible. This guy, what are we talking about? And more explains it. For example, a mitzvah married and a minus. A mitzvah, the 3rd generation is permitted, but makes no difference, male or female. A minus is forbidden forever, but only the males, not the females. My pogul shebeshnei. But if a mitzvah marries an aminis, the aminis is 100% all right. Remember, female by aminis is good. So where's the pogul shebeshnei? Where's the worst of both? There is nothing wrong with the mother. He's aminis, you're allowed to. Ella, we're talking about here, Amayni should not submit this. Let's say an Amayni marries a mitzvah. The male Amayni is forbidden forever. The female mitzvah is only 2 generations forbidden, the 3rd one is permitted. If the child is a male, we say it's an Amayni, forbidden forever to join Klal Yisrael. If it's a female, so and Amayni females are totally mutter, but by mitzvah they're not, till the 3rd generation. If you say, okay, then follow the mother, and at least she is forbidden, her children will be permitted. Next mission, continuing on this theme about marrying Mamzedin, the Mamzedin, and the Sinim. The Sinim, remember, were the Givonim who came and masqueraded as if they came from a foreign country, and Yeshua took them in. And once he took them in, he couldn't do anything with them. So they converted them all, and he made them woodcutters and water carriers. Asurin, they are forbidden to marry into the Jewish fold. The Yisurim forever. There's no difference, they're male or female. Says the pasuk says by a mamzer that a mamzer should not join the Jewish nation. The 10th generation should not come to Kal Hashem, and doesn't say anything about what about beyond the 10th generation. The only place where it says forever is by Ammon, but by Ammon we have a rule: only males and not females. So we have an interesting thing here. We're going to learn from Ammon that by mamzer also is forbidden forever. It's going to be forbidden forever as well, because by Ammoni it says also Gam doir asidi lo yovel lehem, the same thing about mamzer. So they both say 10 generations, but by Ammon it says ad olam. So we're going to make a shava mamzer adolim. The problem is, but by mamzer, by Ammon, it's only the males. So what happened by mamzer? Will it be only the males, or it makes no difference? Says the Gemara. After generations, muteris. The female mamzer is permitted. Why? Yalif asidi ma'ammon. How do you know that mamzer, the 11 generations have been? We learn from Ammon. Umayavi malahalam. Just like over there in the cave is muteris, and just like over there, since we're learning from Ammon, and by Ammon, it's only the male, not the female. Okay, the first generations, the 10 generations, we're not learning from Ammon. It says in the pasuk. By a mamzer, it makes no difference, male or female. Could be learned mum zar, right? It's a stranger or an alien alien flaw, an alien defect. So it makes no difference, male or female. But from the 11th generation onwards, which we are learning from Ammon, maybe we should compare it to Ammon and only males. That's what Rish Lakish says. I've kind of with mutaras. So female mamzeres are permitted from the 11th generation onwards. Over there, females are permitted straight away. Afkan miyad, maybe mamzer also female mamzer should be all right. When do we need Gzer Shava? Only ma'asir ve'elech, from beyond the 10th generation. And that's it. Says the Gemara, says now Mishnah, Mamzerim unasinim asurim, they are forbidden the Isur Israel to marry the Jewish fold forevermore. Echad Charim Echad Nekevas. Our Mishnah clearly says no difference males or female. What's Rish Lakish saying? Like Kasha, it's a machlekes, and Rish Lakish explains how command Amar doing when we learn a Gzer Shavim somewhere else. Do we compare it 100% to that somewhere else, or do we say the principle we'll take from there? Let's come back to what we're trying to learn and see how to adapt it, and that's the argument. How command Amar doing me no umina? I'm talking about according to the opinion and say you learn from there and you learn exactly like there. And therefore, you learn from there the 11th generation, and then you learn from there that that only males, not females. And our Mishnah over here, you learn from there that 11th generation onwards. But how? You go back to Mamzer. Let's see what the rules are by Mamzer. It's no difference males or females, and that's how we apply it. No difference males or females. Wuki ba'asa shows Rabbi Lezer. That's Rabbi Lezer's interesting question. Mamzeres la'achar asara dori mau. So what do you think? What's the din of the female Mamzer after 10 generations? Amalem, he said to them. He didn't really want to get involved so much. He said to them, if you can show me a 3rd generation mamzer, even a male mamzer, I'm going to make him tur. In other words, what does that mean? He believed that mamzerim don't live. The Eibishter makes it so that mamzerim do not pass on their mamzeris to 2 million generations afterwards. I don't believe even a 3rd generation exists. What are you asking me about a 10th or 11th? The mamzer, the Eibishter makes sure that they don't have 2 million generations. Says the Gemara of Anatana, we learned it says clearly in this Mishnah, mamzerim asuri b'Yisur Yisrael will go on forever, as if to say they have many generations, future generations, but they're all forbidden. So they do survive. Rabbi Zeda said the following. If everyone knows that they're mamzer, so we know that they're never going to mix in the Jewish nation, they will live. The law yediyah. If the people don't know that they're mamzer loy chaya, the Eibush will make sure they don't live, because otherwise they'll have all kinds of trouble. The yediyah v'lo yediyah. What about some people know, some people don't know. It's not so public. Then at klosa doida chaya, the first 3 generations will live, because usually you do some research and within 3 generations, everybody remembers the zayda. So therefore, people will keep away from them. But Fei, once you get to the 4th generation, l'chaya, because people will make a mistake. And when you learn any more kedushin, a fascinating thing that by mamzedim, if people forgot that they're mamzedim, they become tired. So therefore, it says here that mamzedim don't even live. That's what Rabbi Lezer meant. They were talking to him about a mamzer that they knew, not about a mamzer that didn't know. So Taisa says that Rabbi Lezer didn't want to get involved in the conversation. He didn't appreciate the conversation. He just gave him a general answer, and he just rebuffed them. There's somebody living in the neighborhood of Ami. They once made a big announcement. You should know this person's a mamzer. Bochi va'oz, start to cry. What are you crying for? I just did you a favor. By publicizing your mamzer, I guarantee that you are going to live and your children are going to live and survive. The Sidim, who are these Nesinim? You think it's Asama Torah, David Gozer Aleim. David decreed on them. Now, the way Rashi learned, big machlek is a shaynim, and the way Rashi and some other shaynim learned, it means that really Mahatayra, you're allowed to marry the Nesim. They converted. It's only Midrabban. We'll see why. David came along and banned. He said, well, their behavior is not Jewish, and therefore he banned them. So it says, the king called the Gevonim and said to them, he said, the Gevonim, they're not part of our nation. So it's only David who said that. My time, but however, other Rishonim agree totally. They say Mahatori not allowed to marry Givonim. They're from the 7 nations. What David HaMelech did was he decreed that they should always remain slaves. They should always remain woodcutters and water carriers. My time goes away. Why did they decree on them? Whatever the decree was. See, this is the story. It says, there was a famine in the time of David. In 3 consecutive years. The first year, David said, "What's going on here? Nothing happened by chance. What's going on here?" He said to the Eden, Shema, to his Avayas, maybe the Jews are idol worshippers, they were just punishing us. The Chsiva says, you will serve other gods, and you'll bow down to them and say, I'll stop the rain. But Kuvale Matsu, no, we're not idol worshippers. Shniya, then another year there was a drought. Maybe you guys were doing arroyos. Maybe they're promiscuous, and that's why this is happening. See, because it says in Pasuk, it says by that the rain stopped. There was no heavy rains. He had the forehead of a woman who was a harlot. Okay, so maybe that's the cause. What could they search? No, nobody was promiscuous. Shlishis, 30, he said, maybe that people who give by appeals, they donate large sums of money, very nicely. And they never keep their promise. The Chsiv, it says, Nesiyim, droplets, the ruach, wind, the geshem, rain, oyin, is not happening. You know why? Because Ish Mishhawel, but everyone prize around by all these false promises, donations they gave. Yeah, I'll give $1,000 here, $500 here, and then they never keep their word. But Kulematza couldn't find that either. Obviously, the times Don Mel, Eden were pretty good. Somebody said, must be, and they were telling me, must be, I'm the one who's shuldig, I'm the one who's liable, responsible. Right away, by Yevakesh, David went ahead out there to search the Hashem and to ask him, what did I do wrong? What do you mean went to investigate from Hashem? He went to the room to me. My mashma, how do you see that? That went to the room to me. Was Asya, Pnei. Here it says that David went to search Pnei Hashem. Ksibha says there, Vishallah, Mishpat Urim Betumim. By Elazar, they went and they asked the Mishpat Urim Betumim and leave from the Hashem. Hashem, and it says, so that what was the Abish's answer to him? The Abish's answer was, base had dummy. He said because of Shol and because of base had dummy, and the reason is because he killed the Givonim. What's going on here? 2 reasons why this is happening. Number 1 is El Shol because of Shol, because he did not eulogize, Eden did not eulogize Shaul when he died there on the sword. Nobody eulogized him properly. Well, based on Damim, Al Asher Hamis Hagivonim, the Shaul HaMelech, the house of blood, he killed the Givonim. Now, when did Shaul HaMelech kill the Givonim? He never killed the Givonim. He killed the city of Noiv, Ir Koinim, that he was told by Doeg Adayim they were harboring David HaMelech, which is not really true, and they were siding to David HaMelech. So he went and destroyed the city of Noiv, and these Kohanim were the ones who were helping out the Gevanim, feeding them. And therefore, now that he killed Noiv, the city of Noiv, there was nobody to feed the Gevanim. Says if he killed the Gevanim, the Chihechem when really find he killed the Gevanim, because he destroyed that city of Noiv, so he must speak in the Mayim Muslim, and they can't get provisions to the Gevanim. As if Shalom killed them themselves. That's on the one hand, he was demanding the honor of Shaul. On the other hand, he was demanding punishment, retribution, because Shaul killed the Givonim. This is odd. On the one hand, you want to go ahead and you're saying that placing Shaul on a pedestal, people didn't give him due respect. And then you demand the punishment because of Shaul, what he did wrong. So you say, yes. It's possible to have these 2 contradictory emotions at the same time. This is what makes people so special and so special. It says the Pasuk, Bachs Hashem, the Eibishter searches called Amve'odet, all the humble people in the world, Hashem Mishpat, Pauloim, that is Mishpat. Well, the fact, Hashem Mishpat, Yisham, Pauloim, where he judges a person, there he also talks about the good things he does. It's possible to have such 2 opposite, conflicting emotions at the same time. So David said, Shaul Naflu Tracy Achishasa. Shaul already passed away 12 months ago. And actually, it's many more years. That wasn't 12 months ago. But he's trying to say, because it says after 12 months, people forget the mace. It's so many years ago already Shaul passed away. We can't make that up. How can we make that up? The hesped that we didn't do at the time. It's too late. So he says here, and in fact, it's not even right to make a hesped so many years afterwards. Nisinim, the other thing than a sinim, let's ask them for mechila. Let's call them over and let's appease them. You call them over. And what can I do for you? How can we atone for what Shalom did to you all those years ago? The land of Hashem. We don't want his money. We don't want anything from him. But you know what we do want? Give us 7 of his kids. We're going to hang them on the gallows. Take revenge. The Fayil trying to appease them. They refuse to be appeased. And now we have a problem. Klal Yisrael was being threatened to die because of a famine, and they're asking for 7 people. Give us 7 people and we'll kill them. Omar, that this is the famous saying, it's actually brought down halacha. There are 3 signs to know if somebody's Jewish. Number 1, rachmanim. They have compassion. Even if something terrible happens to them, they're able to forgive. Habayshonim. They are shy. They're not such extroverts. And goyim l'chasadim, the charitable people. In the beginning of Simon Ibn Ezra, it talks about if you don't know who a guy is and you're trying to work out if he's Jewish or not, you look at these simonim according to one of the opinions there. And if it has it, then you know he's a Yid. So you need 3 simonim, you need all 3, or even 1 is good enough. Rachmanim, I'll give you the ability to have compassion, you have compassion. And how do you know that the Eden are shy? That you should have the fear of the Eibishter always on you, and you should say you won't sin. And Abraham will tell his children, and anybody has these 3 signs from the Gemara, it's not like you have to have all 3. They're worthy to be part of this nation, and the Givonim, they're not worthy of being part of this nation. And then the Gemara continues, but it's probably getting a bit late.